We are so happy to have this next guest speaker, so I'm going to give you a little bit of his background. Dr. Peter Doolittle is Assistant Provost for Teaching and Learning. He's the Executive Director of the Center for Instructional Development and Educational Research, and Professor of Educational Psychology at Virginia Tech, Blacksburg, Virginia. Dr. Peter Doolittle's academic background includes 25 years teaching undergraduate and graduate students in public and private universities, leveraging traditional, blended, and online teaching formats across several subject areas. Doolittle has taught at various institutions in the US, Ireland, Mexico, and Malawi. While at Virginia Tech, he was awarded the University Alum Award for Excellence in Teaching, the Certificate of Teaching Excellence Award, and Graduate Student Advising Award from the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, and the Outstanding Teaching Award from the School of Education. He has published more than 50 peer-reviewed articles and chapters, provided over 100 national and international keynote and invited addresses, and has been awarded in excess of $2 million in NSF and DOE grants. In 2013, he provided a TED Talk at TED Global in Edinburgh, Scotland, How Working Memory Makes Sense of the World. His current research focuses includes the investigation of the impact of working memory capacity and student learning in multimedia, digital learning environments. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Peter Doolittle.
Thank you. Oh, yes, I'm good. All right, thanks. Quick check, am I okay? Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. All right, so I am Peter Doolittle, which makes me Dr. Doolittle. All right. That was starting to fade there for a while, and then we had the Eddie Murphy movies, so that was good. Some people started to remember who Dr. Doolittle was. So that's always a nice way to start. First of all, I appreciate being here. I've never been to Denver, so I got in early yesterday and wandered around and tried not to get run over and figure out the trolley system. And it was nice that there's a Starbucks about 12 feet outside the door to the right. So I was good. I was kind of energized and ready to go. What we're going to do today is talk about teaching and learning, a little bit about memory and some things to avoid, as well as some things to do. But I'm also going to be putting you to work. All right, so if you're digesting, that's okay. But I need the top half of you to continue to work. In a little bit, I'm going to ask you to be writing some things down. So if in the next 10 minutes at some point, if you could dig out just a notepad or something and something to write with, that would be great. Okay? All right, so with that in mind, this whole idea that I'm going to be putting you to work, the first thing I'm going to do is put you to work. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 statements. What I'd like you to do is to read each of those 3 statements, decide, do I agree with it? Do I disagree with it? Or what would I change to make it more acceptable to me? Okay, and then we'll talk a little bit about them. So if you could read these 3 statements, do you agree, disagree, or what would you change to make them more acceptable? Okay, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Okay, I've got about a minute. That last one was a New York minute. Okay, if you can work on finishing up your thoughts. Okay, what I'd like you to do is to grab a partner, left and or right. Go through these 3 fairly quickly. Talk about what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what you might want to change to make them more acceptable. And then we'll talk a little bit as a whole group. So you've got 4.5 minutes for this part. Ready? Go. Okay, so we've got about a minute and a half left. If you can work on finishing up your thoughts. Okay, if we can work on finishing up your thoughts and coming back together. Okay, don't make me whip out my K-12 experience. All eyes up front. Eyes on me. All right, excellent. Good, good, good. Okay, lots of really good discussion. I got a chance to kind of go around, both meet people and listen to what they're saying. Can you give me a number from 1 to 3, please? 2. Let's take a look at number 2. Active learning in students is fostered by note-taking and discussions with fellow students. How many people agreed? How many disagreed? How many wanted to revise? Okay, there we go. All right, so tell me what you think. Whether you agreed, disagreed, or revised, what was something that you would add to or help to explain this? Yes? Okay, so add activity and... Oh, application. So adding activity and application. Does that make 2 better? Headed in the right direction? What else would you do with number 2? Okay, so note-taking might be something that we need to think about based on who we are working with. Okay. So changing note-taking to gathering data, which shifts the way that we're doing it. So we can gather data in lots of ways. We don't have to take notes. We can do it by video. We can do it through experimentation. In fact, we're going to do some of that here. So I hear we need a longer list, that just what's up there. We also need to personalize it. We need to know who we are. We need to know what we're teaching. This is awesome. One of the things this tells us is that the teaching and learning process tends to be more complex than we make it. That we tend to think, oh, kind of like anyone can teach. Can anyone teach? No, yes. I like to say anyone can teach poorly. Okay? If you're looking for really good teaching, then maybe not. All right? So, as we're going to go forward, we're going to deal with some of this complexity. We're going to do more as a group and do more together, because learning is not me sitting here talking at you. So that's not what we're going to be doing. Okay? So any questions before we start? I'll do the requisite 4 seconds of wait time, stare at you. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to talk about learning first, and we're going to do that first. And the whole idea of being here is if our students aren't learning, and I'm going to expand on what we mean by that, then we're kind of missing the boat at some level. So we want to talk about that. We're going to talk about working memory and working memory capacity, since that's really important in how we interact in this world. We're going to talk about silver bullets, in some ways how to avoid them, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. Okay? So luckily I've been given 4.5 hours. So yeah, those that had 30 minutes, sorry to hear that. I think I have it all. So we will have dinner here as well, and then a midnight snack. Okay? So part of what we're going to be doing is talking in ways that might shift perspectives, and a shift in perspective can have a huge impact. And a lot of times, especially with the students you're working with, and we have lots of, I think about our students who are first-gen students, they often need a shift in perspective. And so as we shift our perspectives, them and us as well, a whole world opens up. So a quick video, I love to use videos to set the stage. So a quick video to set the stage about the importance of perspective. All right. Whew. I'm glad we got Gaga and Gandhi kind of situated there. This is proof that if you spend enough time on the web, you eventually find some gems. So here, shifting the perspective changes everything. And so that's really what we're going to be headed towards today. So let's talk about learning. And if we're going to deal with learning, then we need to do a little learning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a series of words. All you have to do is remember them. Okay, now you can't write them down. Okay, that's not remembering. All right, so a series of words. Each word will be up there 3 to 4 seconds. I just need you to hang on to them. Enough. Okay, and in fact, it's enough exactly. Okay, all right, so you ready? Here we go. Okay, so pretty straightforward. There were 12. Right now, your mind is doing a number of different things. Let me ask you this, without saying which one, how many people here started with a strategy in mind? How many had a strategy? Oh, good. How many people were doing brute force, repeating them over and over and over as fast as you could? Okay, good, good. How many of you tried to create some imagery from it? Anybody use something like sentence structure? Create a sentence out of it? Okay, there's lots of different strategies here. How many of you are pretty sure you still have all 12? Okay, so we're 0 for 70. All right, do you know 12 words? Okay, good, because this is going to be a tough gig if there's only 12 words. It'll be a very narrow conversation. So the issue isn't necessarily with what you know, it's kind of what we're doing with these things, and we're going to talk about that as we move forward. What I'm going to do is, rather than have you write them down, I'll just give you a word and you tell me if it was in the list. Okay? So was the word carpet on the list? No. Okay, how about brown? No. Ocean? No. Tree? No. Aardvark? No. Sleep? Yes. Tennis shoe? No. Basketball? No. Okay, so here we go. What's the problem? Okay, what's not up there? Ah, but you were really so gung-ho. All right? Aardvark, no. Sleep, yes. Even the volume went up. All right, even the volume went up. All right, so my question, and there's a couple answers to this, but why does it make sense for you to go sleep? Yes. Okay, so a theme. Okay, so there was an idea. Where did that theme come from? Okay, so were you actively thinking about patterns? How many were looking for some sort of pattern to these? Okay, so we're looking, and that's one of the things as human beings we do really well. Okay, we tend to be pretty good at sorting out patterns, all right? So what does this tell us about what does this tell us one aspect of learning? What does this tell us about learning? What's that? One, it's difficult, yes. Even something like remembering 12 words suddenly seems difficult. Okay, so there's an association component to it. Okay, and we're associating what with what? What's the association is between what and what? Prior experience and whatever's going on, the prior experience and the new experience. So you were taking the new experience of the words and you were associating it with things that you knew. So ultimately, the whole idea that this made sense relative to sleep came from you, not the list. Okay, so when I was doing this in Mexico and I was doing it in Spanish, translating everything and trying to work that out, I was like, oh, sleep. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, no. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, no. And they pointed, they said, see that word? I said, yeah. They said, it means sleep. Okay. So we have to realize that learning is an inside-out process. So that association is what we know and already have experience with whatever we're experiencing. So we have to understand that learning is an inside-out process. It comes from our students out. It's not outside in. It's not us jamming something in their heads. If they can't make a connection, if you have a first-gen student that knows nothing about college, and you said, I need you to go talk to your advisor. Why? What are they going to advise me about? Fashion? You know, they're going to tell me how to, spend my money. They don't understand because they have no experience with that. There's a lot of things that occur at an intrinsic level within higher ed that they may not have connections to. And we may think it's clear until we talk to them. We have no idea. One of the things I love is as I travel internationally, is trying to make sense of their street signs. Because there's all sorts of iconography out there that doesn't make sense to me from my American background. I look at it and I go, it's red, so I know it's bad, and I'm not supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what that is, okay? So this one experiment tells us a number of different things. It tells us that we actively construct knowledge. Okay? We are just not those vessels that we get poured into. We've got to do something, and we're going to talk about that something in a minute. Knowledge is also organized. Okay? If it's not organized for us out here, we organize it ourselves. And even when it is organized, we have to make sense of it. And if there's a disconnect between what I know and what I'm experiencing, I have a hard time with that as a human being. We are not good at abstract knowledge floating free in our brains. We try to connect everything to something else that we know as best we can. Okay, so your mind, even if you weren't trying, already knew that all those words related to sleep, because that's how it works. When specifics are lost, meaning remains. Okay, oftentimes we don't remember the specifics, but we remember the gist. Okay, so how do you do CPR? I don't know, you stand over them and you push a lot. Okay, well, I'm hoping that if I have a heart attack, the person who's about to give me CPR remembers the specifics and not just the general, I'm not quite sure what you do, but I've seen ER and they do this a lot, okay? And so that's oftentimes where we get funny things from our students, because they've lost the specifics and they remember just the gist, and they try to give us that gist and it comes out kind of fun. So we have to remember, if we want them to know the specifics, we have to tell them in advance. Okay? Don't just go for general understanding. You have to know A, B, C, and D. I've been working lately with some of the trainers in the nuclear industry, and for them, just won't do it. Okay? It's got to be very specific, and they're very particular about that. Strategies enhance construction. Well, the strategies weren't necessarily effective in this case. Strategies are one of the ways that we make our minds more effective and more efficient. And so we're going to be talking about some strategies as we move forward. And knowledge construction can be assessed. You knew you didn't have all 12. You were able to look back. And so we can train ourselves to really start to look at what we know and what we don't know and figure those things out. Unfortunately, I was talking over here earlier, we live in a world where faculty are not trained to teach and students are not trained to learn. And that's what we do. I don't know any other area of vocation where that's the case. Okay? I'm going to be an appraiser of art. What do you know about art? Nothing. Fantastic. You're our guy. Come on in. It's a Picasso. How much? $12.50. Okay? $14 if you want the frame. All right? So part of what we do here is we think about, well, how do we work through the teaching to make it more efficient and more effective? And how do we work with our students? Because our students, while they can assess their thinking, tend to be very poor at it. Our students, and really ourselves, we tend to overestimate what we know. All right? I've been lucky enough to teach from third graders on. And the younger they are, you ask, so do you know this? Oh, yeah. Cool. Can you tell me? Nah. It's just like, you think you know it. And so how do we train ourselves, and how do we train our students to be more cognizant of the way they're thinking? So we'll kind of cross that ground a little bit as we go as well. As a heuristic, as a rule of thumb, bless you, what we process, we learn. We often use the words active learning. At Tech, we call it hands-on, minds-on, or we want students to be engaged. What we mean is they are processing. Okay? They are actively involved in this. And actively involved doesn't necessarily mean they're in groups talking. Because sometimes your high-processing students aren't saying a word, but man, their brain is just spinning away. Okay, it's like the metaphor of the duck going across the pond. Everything looks nice and cool on the top, and below their paddles are just going like this. So we need to think about processing. Now, processing isn't just cognitive. Yes, we need to think, we need to solve problems, we need to do lots of things mentally, but we also have to do certain things behaviorally in order to learn. So when I'm doing the nuclear work, a lot of them are working, they all have these big, giant simulators that are huge, because the actual mechanics are huge. And so they're in an environment that simulates the real environment. If I want students to be able to talk to clients, then I need them to talk to clients. Okay? They can do work with peers, but a client is different. When I'm teaching pre-service teachers, I can have a teacher stand up in front of a class of other pre-service teachers and say, pretend you're fifth graders. I taught middle school for 7 years. You cannot pretend you're a fifth grader, okay? They're special. I mean, they're just come in, fifth, sixth, seventh. You don't know who's bounding in that door. Because some days they're just like Tigger, man. They just come in and you're wondering what's on the menu for today. Who's excited and who's not. Who just grew up 3 inches overnight. And you've got all sorts of different maturity levels. So you've got to figure out what's going on at the moment. Okay? So sometimes you have to be there. It has to be behavioral. Social. There are certain things we learn by talking. Okay? One of the things for me is if you can't say it, you don't know it. Right? So if you say, do you know it? Oh, yeah. Tell me. And then you can hear their brains churning. What are the right words? How do I put this together in a way that'll make sense to somebody else? Well, when I define it, blah, blah, blah. And you can hear all that processing going on. So we need to put them in environments where they can share what they know, what they're learning to know. Because part of it is engaging in that social interaction. And then I explain something to somebody and they explain back what they think they heard. And we can negotiate what it is that I'm saying. We use this word. I teach a course in constructivism and learning. The author used the word build. We used construction. Is there a difference? We talk about silence versus being silenced. Is there a difference between being silent and being silenced? Sure. There's a gigantic power difference between those. How we use our language is important, so we have to get used to using it. So there are social interactions that need to occur. Affect is the one we tend not to pay much attention to. What we care about, what we value, what our opinions are, that all impacts our learning. And so things that we are already very pro towards, we're going to engage in a lot of positive processing. Things that we're anti towards, we're going to have trouble. I just don't believe that. Okay? All that sustainability stuff, come on. Keep drinking it, getting that oil. We need all that oil that we can. I don't believe in sustainability. So if I'm teaching sustainability, that person's going to be a challenge, and I need to understand that. Okay? Just as much as the student who is pro, I need the person who's pro sustainability to have a critical eye. Does that mean all of it's good? And then we bring in fracking. Say, is fracking good or bad? Well, what does the data tell us? Okay? What is beyond opinion? So when we think about how students learn, if they're not processing, they're not learning. How do we get them to do the kinds of processing necessary for them to learn the kinds of things we want them to know? Does that make sense? Which means we need to know what we want them to know. You know? Okay? So do we want them to be problem solvers? Do we want them to be good interacting with others, where they have to explain to all sorts of people from various lives certain information, because that's a challenge as well? Do they need to be able to go out and build things? Do they need to be very flexible in their learning? Do they need to take algorithms and do those? What is it that we want from them? That's going to influence how we teach. Okay? All right. So, let me back this up. So I'm getting ready to shift to another topic, so we're going to need a video to do that. So here's a video talking about processing, and in some ways, how processing can go wrong. There you go. So, all right, so what do you do when you don't have volume? All right, so people can process things differently. Have you been in a class and working with students where one student gets it and the other one doesn't, and gets something very different? Okay? And part of it is then asking them, so tell me about this, because at some point it makes sense to them. They've done something that it makes sense to them. What we need to do is figure out what that is. So, let's talk about working memory capacity. Now, if we're going to deal with working memory capacity, we have to back up and talk about short-term memory, because we have to make a differentiation here. And so in order to talk about short-term memory, I'm going to give you another task. Okay? I'm going to give you a series of letters. I need you to try to remember as many letters as you can. Okay? There'll be 18 of them. Don't expect you to remember all 18. Remember as many letters as you can in order. Okay? In order. So, and I'm going to ask you to write these down when we're done, so have pen ready. It'll be up here for about 10 seconds. Okay? Are we good? I think they put some pads out if you need that. If you're not prepared for class, talk to your neighbor and see if you can borrow a pen. All right, here we go. As many letters as you can recall in order. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is to write down as many letters as you can recall. Okay. All right, here's the letters again. Give yourself a point for each letter you have in the correct position. So something from 0 to 18. All right, everybody good with that? Everybody has a number? Okay, so let's see how we did. Now, you're going to need to raise your hand probably more than once as we go through this. We're going to be talking about your score. If you don't like your score, make up one you like better. Okay? We won't be checking. We're all right with that. So the other thing is we are among friends. This is American Honors Friends here, all right? So how many of you recalled at least two? At least two. So pretty much almost everybody, right? Okay. So just short of 100%. How many recalled at least 4 in the right order? Okay, so still vast majority. So we're good there. How many recalled at least 6? Okay, we're starting to lose some now. All right, that's good. Now, how many recalled at least 8? Okay, so we're now down to 50%, maybe a tad under. How many recalled at least 10? Okay, great. See, everybody's going, ooh, all right. Your stock just went up, all right? And now, how many recalled at least 12? All right, welcome to the Mensa Club, very nice. Okay, so about 5 out of 70. Now, this is pretty typical when we're looking at short-term memory. Okay, in 1956, George Miller wrote an article where he talked about the magic number 7 plus or minus 2. What he was talking about was short-term memory. How many things can we hang on to? And if we look at this, 7 being between 6 and 8, plus or minus, so between 5 and 9, that's for the most part where people lie. Some less, some more. Now, I want to give you just the first 2 sentences of the article that he wrote. And he wrote it by looking at other people's data, not his. But I've never read an article quite like this one before. And so, in some ways, just to honor the fact that he did this. So this is how the article starts off with. My problem is that I have been persecuted by an integer. For 7 years, the number has followed me around, has intruded on my most private data, and has assaulted me from the pages of our most public journals. Okay? He was haunted by this number 7. And he goes on to explain a number of studies where right around 7 seems to be what we can remember. When we talk about short-term memory, what we're talking about is our ability to hang on to a little bit of information for a little bit of time. Okay? It gets a little bit more complex if you happen to be in the area of neurology or advanced psych, but for the most part, short-term memory is all about retention. A little bit of information for a little bit of time. The problem is that's not really how we live our lives. So on your way here, were you walking going, I have to get this, and I remember this, now don't forget her name, it's this. You weren't repeating 7 things over and over to yourself. That's not how we live our lives. We live our lives instead through working memory. Working memory is really the crucible of thought. It's that part that is active in which we interact with the world around us. Okay? So working memory is just that, it's memory that's working. When we take a look at working memory, it has a number of components. What working memory does is it allows us to experience the world around us and hang on to some of that. We never hang on to everything. Not everything that you hear or see or taste or smell or any of that. Some of that we think is relevant, we hang on to. We reach back in our long-term memory to pull forward whatever information is necessary to solve the problem we're trying to deal with, whatever our goal state is. So we take some information from our experience, some from our long-term memory, and we process it in light of our current goal, oftentimes in or amid distraction. Okay? And so if somebody else is talking to you, or the TV is on, or you just have competing thoughts, we live in a very distracted environment. Okay? What's one of your main distractions? Your phone. Okay, and the research really backs that up. Just having your phone on the table is distracting you because it might go off. Somebody might have texted you and you didn't notice. Obama just sent you a text. Okay, I need some help. Okay, such and such country, they've done something bad and I need your help now. It could be, and you would have missed it if you didn't have your phone with you. How many of you sleep with your phone within at least 4 feet? Yeah, look at that. Why? Why? It's your alarm clock. That's the same reason why I do it. We could just buy an alarm clock. You know they sell them separately, all right? But I'm the same way, all right? So mine's usually like 2 feet away, all right? And so we have to be careful. We live in a distractible environment. Our working memory is how do we interface with the world around us at every given moment. Right now, your working memory is churning away. If you're paying attention to me, then you're listening to what I'm saying. You're reaching back for information that you know, putting it together. Do I agree with them? Do I not agree with them? How is this useful? What's going on? But then somebody over here says something like, oh yeah, no, that's, yeah, suit, kind of nice, yeah. What was he saying? Okay. We're just distractible, okay? Little sharp object, woo-hoo-hoo, okay? So we've got to be careful because our working memory is really where we interface with the world. And so we're going to play with that a little bit. So keep in mind, short-term memory, storage only. Working memory, storage and processing. And it's when we put those two together, things get kind of weird. All right? Get kind of weird in a good way. Now, if we're going to do working memory capacity, I'm going to put you to work again. Okay? We're going to take your working memory out for a spin. And we're going to use one of the techniques that I use in my research called the operation span task. Okay, so we're going to do some significant math chanting. Okay, this is going to be a nice event. So I'm going to demo for you what the operation span task looks like. Okay, you're going to see math word sentences that look like this. And we're going to do this out loud because I have to make sure you're processing. So this is just an example. You're going to say something like 3 plus 7 divided by 2 equals 5. And where the question mark is, you either need to say true if the math statement's true or false if it's not. Okay, so you're going to have to do the math. So 3 plus 7 divided by 2 equals 5, true, cow. And then you're going to see another one. 8 minus 3 plus 1 equals 7, false, star. The whole point of the task is you have to remember the words. Because then this is going to appear. Recall the words out loud, and I'm going to want you to go, excellent. And you only get credit if you have all the words in the right order. Okay? So can you see how this task requires you to both process and to maintain some information in your memory? Okay? So, you sound like you're ready. Are you good? Okay. So the first one that we're going to do only has 2 statements. So it'll be just like what I just did. Okay? So here we go, and this is out loud. 9 is 6. And they are? Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so how many people got 2? Got both of them? Okay, so here we are. We're about 90%. Okay? Now what we're going to do is the same thing, but we're going to do it with 3 statements. Okay? Sure? Correct. Correct. Yes. Speaking out loud, 1, also makes us make sure you're doing it. Because what you'll do is you'll go true and you'll get to the number without spending the processing time. So even when I'm doing this in research, they have a headset on with a microphone. Because that's part of making sure you're processing, so your insight is completely correct. So that's why we force it to be oral. Okay? All right, you ready? 3 of them? Here we go. 7 plus 2 plus 1 equals 9, false, right. words are? It's a white cement pony. All right. So, how many people had all three? Okay, good. That was almost the same. Not a whole lot less. Okay. Now we're going to do 4. Same thing. You ready? Here we go. 3 + 2 - 4 = 2 false book. 6 + 2 / 4 = 2 true printer. 8 - 3 × 2 = 10 true speaker. 4 / 2 - 4 = 4 false duck. And the 4 are? Could you hear the difference? Speaker, duck. All right, so book, printer, speaker, duck. How many had all 4? Okay, so now we are down below 50%. We're down to about 40%. Okay, here we go. This time, yes? No, again, they have the headsets. Yeah, they have the headsets on and their microphones, and they're spread out. So yeah, this one you have a distraction. In some sense, this is worse. So yeah. Yeah. Well, and then you get others who won't commit to true and false. They just listen. So, all right, here we go. 5 of them. Okay, last one at 5. 9. All right, nice job. System Explorer, lifts, wire, spring. Okay, so how many got 5? Ish. 5 plus rounding error. Okay, so we ended up with about 6 people who ended up with that. Could you feel with the 5 the words slip away? Because I started hearing giggles. And usually that's when you remember you can't remember the first one. Yes? Okay. Yeah. So in order to remember this, you start developing systems. If we did this a lot, and when I do this in research, they do 60 of these because we've got to see how they do over time, so it takes a while. They do start to get better. With practice, you get a little better, but not a whole lot better, and that ends up being really important because as we talk about working memory capacity, the research on making it larger is lousy. And what I mean by lousy is it doesn't demonstrate effectiveness. So there are programs out there that are designed to make your working memory capacity larger. Don't believe them, okay? If anything, they make you a little better at that one task that you're doing. So you can get better at this task. Not a whole lot better, but a little better. And getting better at this task does not mean you have a better working memory capacity for other tasks. So we need to keep that in mind. So when we look at this from a working memory capacity standpoint, using this methodology, the mean score is usually between 3 and 4. So if we say, well, how many things can you remember? 3 or 4 if we're talking about working memory capacity. If we're talking about short-term memory, it's 7, which is why, depending on who you listen to, you're going to hear either 7 or 3 or 4. So if you heard my TED Talk, you'll hear me talk about 3 and 4. And the question I get the most often is, well, where does that come from? Because everybody knows George Miller's 7 ± 2. And the difference is I'm talking about working memory capacity because that's really where we live our lives versus short-term memory. Short-term memory is important. And we've got tons and tons of research on it. But if I'm going to invest my time, I'm going to invest it in working memory. Okay? Does that make sense? So when we're talking about processing, we've got to keep this in mind. Because if we can only handle 3, 4 things if we're processing while we're doing it, that's not a lot. We can easily tax that. And like any other measure of human existence, there are some people who are really good at this and some who aren't. And so we're going to talk about that in just a second. So we need to keep this in mind. Positive impacts of a high working memory capacity. Ooh, yes? So the question was, if going through the task, if I asked them to reverse it, where if it was a true, asked them to say false, and if it was false, I asked them to say true, that would be a huge distraction. That would be an extra layer of processing where we have to reverse process. They're going to do even more poorly. And we need to think about that sometimes too. If we're asking for the reverse of an idea, that takes a lot more processing than the actual idea itself. So if we're giving things like multiple choice questions and we say, which of the following is not true? That means they have to figure out which ones are true and then reverse the thought process. And that's a lot harder, but not harder in a, can you get it, but it's harder in a trick way, which means it's a bad question. So stay away from not kind of questions. Yes?
So if you wanted to remember those letters in our working memory or short-term memory,
Sure.
would we maybe make a sentence around it? Would that then turn it into working memory?
Correct. You would need to do more processing in order to make it more meaningful and move it towards long-term memory. In this case, I didn't really ask you to do much with it. Because yeah, when I used to live in Maryland, and this has been about 25 years ago, I don't know why, but I can still remember my driver's license. D4346801743225. That number has no meaning to me. I don't know why, but I have now processed it for 25 years, because every now and then I say this, and it just makes it more and more memorable. Yes, sir.
I teach programming, so you can get to this later if you want.
Sure.
But that not thing you just talked about,
Yes.
I can't get away from that.
You cannot, correct. Yeah, and in fact, if you're programming, not isn't always not. Sometimes not is an exclamation mark.
Right.
And so it can be represented differently, and I've been programming for 20, 25 years and used to teach it. It's just part of the vernacular. It's part of the processing of the computer, getting it to do certain things and not do others. So you're right. The question is, have you noticed over time that students have a hard time sometimes dealing with not?
Yeah, because I teach digital logic circuits, and there's
Okay.
Snore, there are circuits that are negations of other circuits.
So you're right, you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
So there are certain things that are hard to process, and my guess is after you've taught something for a number of years, you can now point them out. They're going to have a hard time with this. Okay, we're doing biology, we're going to do the Krebs cycle. I know they have a hard time with that. How do we get them to process in meaningful ways so that they can be effective and efficient? So you as the experts have to make sense of this for your area. I'm not a subject matter expert in geography, and I'm not a subject matter expert in French. And I can work with you. I can't give you that answer, though. This is something you need to work through. Okay? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was curious, when you use the word true or false, have you ever done any research that shows that when you use true, it's easier to remember?
You know I have not.
Because if you're trying to remember a bunch of things, it seems like false is very close to the concept of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe more in your mind really quickly more than true is.
Sure.
So I kind of thought that's where you were going to go with that at first, that we would
Yeah.
remember the truths more than the false.
Yeah, no, I haven't done that. If the things for which you answer true, do you remember them more often than the things for which you answer false? I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me thinking about it, but I also don't know. Usually in these kinds of things, the error rate is really low. It's usually less than 1%. So it's generally pretty low. Yes? Sure. Okay, the question is, what is the role of time in processing? Well, time is really important. The more time that we process, or the more we process over time. That is, we do it on a Monday and then we do it on a Wednesday. So that kind of processing is more memorable. The trick with this one is, each individual goes at their own pace. So they say it, so they don't get more processing time because somebody else is talking slower. So if I talk fast, 3 plus 3 divided by 6 is equal to 2, false, then I hit the space bar and I move on to the next one. So time, from a processing standpoint, is really important, especially time, what we call spaced practice, time over a series of events. So one more question, then we're going to move on. Yes? Those words were very randomly. One day about 20 years ago or 15 years ago, I was just sitting down writing them. So there's nothing special about the words. Yeah. Not like sleep and aardvark. So those with high working memory capacity have higher fluid intelligence. What fluid intelligence is the ability to solve problems you've never seen, problems where information is missing. Usually it's things where you have to be very flexible because you don't have an algorithm to solve it. Crystallized intelligence is where you're basically solving a problem you've solved before. So when I've done some work with our physics department, one of the things they lament is they get students who go through a physics degree solving all the problems that have answers. Okay, so they get kind of a crystallized intelligence of how do I solve this? Then they get to their master's program where all the questions are problems that don't have answers. What's the best solution? What's the more appropriate solution? And they say they have a hard time making that switch. And so if that's the case, if we want them to be able to solve problems fluidly, then we need to start them off when they're undergrads solving those kinds of problems. Because as far as I'm concerned, in the land of physics, somewhere there's a continent in this world where there's all sorts of inclined planes with blocks stuck halfway through because they can't get down. And there's pulleys there that everybody's pulling on. I've never run into a block on an inclined plane except in a physics class. But there's lots of problems, and they're designed to get you to understand certain concepts. But I keep waiting to run into this land of block and pulleys, and I haven't yet. But so if you find it, send me an email. I'd be interested in doing that. So they're better at fluid intelligence. They're better at flexible problem solving. Good long-term activation. They can reach back and grab information that's necessary in their long-term memory. They have really good attentional control. They can focus on what's going on out here. They can also focus what's going on here without being easily distracted. Do you have a friend, and maybe it's your partner in crime, who as they're reading the paper or reading the computer, you can be in the room and go, John, just keeps reading. John, you've got to touch them because they're so focused on what they're doing, they've tuned out the world. Okay? I'm not nearly that focused. I get distracted by things around me. How many people here when you're studying and working want it quiet? How many want a buzz, want things going on? Okay? Different people. So we have to pay attention to some of those. But people with a higher working memory capacity tend to be very good at controlling their attention. They're good at reading and language comprehension. They're good at reasoning in general. They're really good at storytelling. Storytelling is really complex because you've got multiple characters going on that have histories, presents, and futures, and you need to know where they've been and where they are and where they're going in order to make sense to the people around you. A lot goes into good storytelling. Okay? In general, high working memory capacity means they're good at complex cognition. Okay? The problem, as we talked about before, is it's really hard to make somebody's working memory capacity larger. So we need to focus on something different. We need to not focus on training it to be larger. We need to focus on strategies. And one of the things that I've been working on for the last 10 years is what strategies work that help those with low working memory capacity but don't hinder those with high. So I'm going to give you 5. Okay, these are 5, and by the way, I'm going to make all this available online. I didn't for now, but I will give all these to Donna, and you guys can work on that. So copy them down if you want, but you'll be seeing them in the next 24 hours either way. So 5 strategies. The first one is segmentation. A number of years ago, MIT put their lectures online. You can go on, you can watch an hour-and-a-half lecture on computer programming or whatnot, and I love computer programming. I do it every day. But when I'm watching one of those, I take whatever the sharpest cutlery around and I jam it into my ear over and over and over again. Because after about 15 minutes, I can't stand watching the person on the screen because I'm so bored. Because they're just walking back and they're doing a little board work and then asking questions that nobody's answering. There's no engagement. And so I just think, oh my gosh, there's got to be something better than this. What segmenting is instead of giving them a half an hour, and we're doing more and more online, give them no more than 5 minutes, maybe 8, which means you've got to be efficient in what you're trying to get across to them. But once you reach 10 or 15 minutes, you're losing people, even if they're interested. Try to keep it as short. We did a study where we took an 11-minute video. We asked one group to look at it in 11 minutes. Another one, we divided it up into 7 segments. Another one, we divided up into 14, 21, and 28 segments for an 11-minute video. And what we found is the learning went up every time we did that. So all 11 was the worst, 28 was the highest. But we also asked them the affect question. Did you feel like it helped you? Was it annoying? We actually asked them, did it annoying? What we found is when they got to 28, they didn't find it very effective and they thought it was annoying, which I could imagine. They're doing about 15 seconds and then they have to stop every time. But the idea is, especially for people with low working memory capacity, they get overloaded very quickly. Segment it, give them smaller pieces. If you're doing something here, put an activity in, do a video, something along those lines, which furthers where you're headed, but at the same time gives their brains a chance to relax a little bit and catch up. Okay? Scaffolding instruction, give them support. One of my classes, I give them this nice little table that they fill out as we go. High working memory capacity students don't need it. Low working memory capacity students need it. It doesn't hurt the high working memory capacity students. They fill it in, but they don't need it to be successful. But the organization, the scaffolding really helps the students who are having a hard time keeping all that straight in their mind. So everybody wins. So in this case, we're dealing with a situation of equity. I want everybody to succeed in my class. How do I give them support so they can do that? Okay? Lower the cognitive load or lower information density. Imagine somebody's doing a PowerPoint where all their notes are on them. So every slide has 5 bullets, and each bullet's a sentence, and they're churning through. They're doing 45 of them in an hour. That's high density. That's a lot of information. Your working memory, your low working memory students are going to have trouble with that because they're going to want to write down every word. And so they're going to be burning up ink and everything as fast as they can. Try to lower that down. Space it out. Lower cognitive load is just how much cognitive involvement is needed to be successful. So are we doing high-level problem solving, which you're asking me to do it in my head? That's going to be high load. Is half of it done and I'm just working an example? It's called worked examples. And it's an example with parts missing. And so I work through part of it, I just answer certain parts. That's lower cognitive load. Okay? So what's our cognitive load? Lots of examples, especially concrete examples. They will learn through analogy. They'll learn from those examples. And then practice with feedback. Probably the #1 strategy is to give students feedback. Students with low working memory capacity can't do a task, monitor the task, generate feedback, and implement the feedback in their minds. They're just not processing that way. So let's give them feedback. Let's give them some support. Let's go ahead. We could have a handout that said, explain what you just did. What worked? What didn't work? How might you augment what didn't work? How then might you apply that? All that scaffold's doing is helping me think through the process and not having to keep it all in my head at the same time. Okay? Now, as we move to this next section, clarity is going to be important. So here's a quick video. Now the video does a number of things now that we've been talking about this. It shifts the tone, because I can tell right now you're getting a little bit antsy, like he's been talking a little longer than I'd like. So I'm going to shift gears and this is going to help me. We've been doing a fair amount of density, so there's things in your head. But you also just need a break. So this is my break, and it's a way of injecting humor and shifting the pace at which we're going.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
All right, now, one of the things this reminds me of is, for one of my classes, 50% of it are international students. And they do a fair amount of reading, and this is a graduate class. The reading is pretty high level. They're reading things that were seminal pieces written 40, 50 years ago. And one of the things that they told me, I have them evaluate the class every time we meet once a week. They said, we're kind of having trouble with the vocabulary. I said, okay. So now for all the readings, I give them a vocab sheet. where they can recognize and write down the definitions. And in class, I make sure that I emphasize, so if we're talking about institutionalization, well, this is what the author means by institutionalization, and they can write that down or whatnot. I've given that to them, and I've also just given them the definitions, and I'm trying to figure out what's the best way. Because it may be it's not worth the processing, I just should give them the words. But a lot of these terms, they're not only a challenge for my English as a primary language, but also for English as a secondary, tertiary language. So I'm trying to negotiate that so I don't get this. I'm going, oh, I don't actually know what that word means. So, all right, so we're talking about processing, we're talking about working memory capacity, which brings us to the doorstep of multitasking. Okay, and multitasking has been the bane of my existence for the last 15 years, and I'll tell you why. We're shifting topics. What do we need? We need a video, all right? So a quick video of multitasking in action that should both make you laugh and cringe at the same time.
All right, so we're driving on the freeway. I look over, and this guy is reading a book. Wait. Is that an iPad?
The book is here.
Kindle.
The iPad is there.
Is that a Kindle and a book?
Yo, dog, I hear you like.
No way. You speed up.
He's on his cell phone.
And a Kindle.
That is multitasking.
And a book.
All right, be afraid, be very afraid. If you pass this individual, keep driving as fast as you can. So they've got a book open, and they've got their, I'm not exactly sure where that was, but basically 3 different things. And this person's gonna feel like, yes, I can multitask, I'm awesome, as long as nothing happens. But if somebody hits the brakes in front of them, right into the back. If a deer jumps across, dead deer. So let's look at multitasking. I've got about, I believe, 25 minutes. Is that about where we're going? Okay, I'm getting the okay sign. Let's do a little bit about multitasking because it deals with processing and working memory capacity. Now, when we talk about multitasking, right around the year 2000, there were 3 things written that caused me consternation. Tapscott, Fran, and Prensky all wrote about this awesomeness of our current millennial students and how great multitaskers they are. Okay? Now, there's no data in any of this. They just saw people. They saw their kids. They're online. They're watching Netflix. They're typing away and they're texting or whatnot. And they just went, oh my gosh, digital natives accustomed to the Twitch speed multitasking. That was the year 2000. We are still dealing with this issue. If somebody in the year 2000 had pulled over an instructional designer or a psychologist or an educational psychologist and said, what do you think? They said, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. Now, I love this quote from Hamilton, Mansell, and Beach. The greater the number of objects to which our consciousness is simultaneously extended, the smaller is the intensity with which it is able to consider each. Multitasking has 2 points of friction. One is our ability to pay attention to more than one thing at once. The other is our ability to reach back in long-term memory for 2 pieces of information to solve 2 problems at the same time. We don't like to do either. Now, the reason why I bring this one up, I was writing a chapter on this. So I said, well, let me go back and, in my psych background, I knew this was there. Let's find some of that early literature. Okay? And I found this quote. And what I like about this is Hamilton, Mansell, and Veach said this in 1861, 150 years ago. The first dual processing research was really done in the early 1900s, right around 1904, 1905. We've known for over 100 years we don't multitask well. I don't care if they're Twitch speed or not. I don't care what generation they're in, what letter we give them. They're just not good at it. It's just part of being a human being. So let's go ahead and play with that just a little bit. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to put you to work. So you're going to need something to write on, okay? And you're going to be a little bit more active in a writing sense in this one. So what I'm going to ask you to do is this. I'm going to want you to count from 2 to 60 by 2s. And I'm going to want you to write this down. So you're going to write down 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 until you get to 60. While you're doing that, I'm going to read you something. And when you're done, look up here, there'll be 5 questions. Just answer those 5 questions as best you can. Okay? So you're going to do the math. I'm going to read you something, and then you're going to answer the questions. Okay? Are we ready? Okay, the math, as fast as you can, go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. When you finish the math, look up and answer these 5 questions, please. Okay, so if you just write down the answer to each of these 5. Okay, got a minute. Okay, here we go. To what was pledged allegiance? To the flag. Okay, what country was mentioned? United States of America. For what does the flag stand? The republic for which it stands. Flag symbolizes how many nations? 1. And what deity was mentioned? God. Give yourself a point for each one that you answered correctly. Okay. Again, we are among friends. Okay. And your performance on this will depend on whether or not you grew up in the United States saying this every day for 18 years. How many had 0? 0? Okay. 1, 2. Excellent. 3. Good. 4. Sweet. 5. Okay, nice. So we had a mean score of 4.33. Very nice job. All right, let's go to the next task. For this one, I'm going to want you to count from 1 to 30 by ones. Same thing, write it as fast as you can. While you do that, I'm going to read something to you, and when you're done, there'll be 5 questions. Okay, so 1 to 30 by ones. You ready? Go. Call things by their right names. Glass of brandy and water. That is the current but not the appropriate name. Ask for a glass of liquid fire and distill damnation. And when you're done, look up for these 5 questions. Got about a minute and a half. Okay, 38 seconds. All right, let's see how we did. All right, what are we urged to do in the passage? Call things by their right names. Good. What was the original name of the drink? Brandy and water. If you only got one, partial credit's allowed. What was the subsequent name? Liquid fire and distilled damnation. Okay? How many actual liquids are mentioned? 2. Okay? And then what was distilled? Damnation. All right, give yourself a point for each one that you answered correctly. If you have partial credit, just move it up to the next highest number. Okay? All right, so here we go. Again, we are friends. How many had 0? Excellent. How many had 1? Good job. 2. Sweet. 3. Good. 4. Okay, and 5. Anybody get 6? Okay, so mean score was right around 3. Okay, right around 3. Now, for the third task, I want you to count from 100 back to 3 by subtracting 7s. Okay? So this is your minus 7s table. And while you're doing that, I'm going to read you something and then there'll be questions. Okay? So starting at 100, subtracting by 7s as fast as you can, go. A good name is like a precious ointment. It fills all about and will not easily go away. For the odors of ointments are more durable than those of flowers. Okay, I've only got about 15 minutes left. So go ahead and answer the questions that are on the screen. Give you a minute. Try to figure out where the flowers go. Okay, here we go. What is a good name like?
Still damnation.
Excellent. Obviously high working memory capacity and you're using all of it. Sweet. All right. So what is a good name like? Precious ointment. Very good. Why is a good name good? It fills all about, will not easily go away. It persists. A good name persists. What type of odors are more durable? The odors of ointments are more durable. Number 4, the odors are more durable than what? Flowers. There's the flowers one. What's the general point of the passage? What's that? What did you say? Things smell. Yes. I mean, take a shower every day. So what does the passage mean? Keep your good name. Oftentimes it arrives before you get there. Give yourself a point for each one you answered correctly. Okay? You guys are like not even looking down. It's like, yeah, how many points did you get? Okay, how many people had 0? Woohoo! With pride, next one. How many had 1? Good, good, good. 2. Good. 3. 4. 5. Okay, so somewhere around that 0 to 1 range. Okay? Now, as far as multitasking, what does this tell us? Yeah, I keep hearing the word sucks a lot. Are we good at it or bad at it? We're bad at it. We're just not built. Even the functional MRI data where they have people doing these kind of multitasking environments while they're watching what's going on in their brain tells us we can't do it. Our performance goes down, and it goes down depending on what we're doing a lot. So, one of the things that we talk about is the tasks themselves. If we take a look at the first one where everybody did pretty well, the math task, counting by 2s to 60, would we say that was easy or hard? Easy. We would call that an automated task, a task where we have lots of experience. You don't even think about it. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I'm not doing the math. I'm just saying them. Okay, we can count by 5s and 1s and 2s and 10s, and we're pretty automated. The Pledge of Allegiance, is that automated, or does that, what we would call conscious, does it require a lot of thought? If you grew up in the States, it's automated. Because as soon as I said, I pledge allegiance, you went, oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. We've only been together for an hour and a half, and you already don't trust me, okay? Because you know I'm going to do something. So how many people here were monitoring to make sure I didn't pull in another country or something? Yeah, see? Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, he was nice, he was pretty cool, but don't trust the man with, So, 2 automatic tasks. How did we do? We did great. Now, we do the second one, counting from 1 to 30. Is that automatic or conscious? It's automatic. But then, as we start talking about calling things by the right names, glass of brandy and water, does anybody have that on their refrigerator as your favorite quote? Okay, so is listening and making sense of that automatic or conscious? Conscious. As soon as we put a conscious task in, it drops down. Okay, now things can move back and forth because walking and talking are both automatic tasks. Okay? But if it's a snowy, icy day, and you're walking, and suddenly you start doing this, you kind of do the ice dance, making sure that you're walking like a 1-year-old trying to get yourself. Are you taking video of this? So what seems automatic can become conscious. You're driving and you've got the radio on and you're having some Diet Coke and you're having kind of conversation, and suddenly it starts raining really hard, like you can only see 5 feet in front of you. What do you do to the person next to you? Shh. You shush them, and you're okay doing that. What do you do with the radio? Turn it off. What do you do with the Coke? You put it down, unless you're doing that and you put that down too. Then what do you do with your hands? 10 and 2, baby. You're 10 and 2. You haven't done that since you got your license, but there's so much rain. I'm there. It's not like you forgot it, all right? As soon as we add a conscious task, it goes down. We had 2 conscious tasks and our brains explode. Because we were down in the 0 to 1, mostly 0. Okay? We just can't multitask that way. Okay? If we want to be able to do multiple things at once, we have to develop a certain amount of automaticity in those tasks, because it requires less cognitive load, giving us room for something else. In the chapter that we wrote, we looked across all sorts of things, and we decided that the evidence just didn't support any real effective multitasking. Okay? Now, how about youngsters? Because we often hear our students, they're different. Okay? How are they? Okay? They claim to be different. All right, one quick thing. While we tend not to multitask, what we do tend to do is task switch. We go from one task to the other. So I'm watching a movie, and then I'm texting, and then I come back to the movie. It's like watching multiple channels on that TV. Have you ever missed who did it because you were on the wrong channel? Okay? That's the way task switching works. So as we move from one to another, we shift our mind's focus over to that, which means we're no longer processing the other stuff. The other thing is there's a task switching cost. Anytime we re-engage a new task or a task that we were switching back and forth, there's re-engagement. Have you ever been working on a task and somebody comes up and asks you a question and it takes you 10 minutes to get back to where you were before, get your thought processes involved? So sometimes it's a very short cost, sometimes it's a much longer cost. Lots of research on this. I'm just going to go over a couple things. One, people who are using their laptops in class who are off task have worse retention and class performance because they're not paying attention to what should be processed. And if they're also doing that, if they're multitasking while they're studying, they do less well academically. This is my favorite. Students who use their laptops in a multitasking fashion in class tend to lose about 11%. Their performance goes down 11%. Those who are sitting around them, their performance goes down worse, 17%. Because if the one person is watching Game of Thrones and they have their headphones on, they're engaged. If I'm 2 rows back, it's harder for me to watch the screen. Okay? But it's distracting, so it's not just that one person who's being distracted, it's the people around them. One of the strategies for this is a lot of times people will make the back 2 rows, if you want to be using your computer, you've got to be in the back 2 rows. So there's nobody behind you. If you go to certain theater events, they will allow you the back 2 rows if you want to blog the event, but they don't want you up front. There's also, people will put like front left is the computer land. You can use it, do whatever you want over here. The research has good results. The students who are being sequestered don't mind. The students who aren't appreciate it, and their performance seems to be better. So, well, not the ones who are multitasking, they're still doing poorly. So that seems to be a viable solution. Yes, sir. Yeah. I would say it's midland robust. I'm looking for other people to have done it. So this comes from one study. To me, the actual percentages are a little less interesting than just the fact that this cone of distraction seems to exist.
So is this just isolated to multitasking, or if you were to take a student who on a laptop and project it, would they have higher accountability because of what they're seeing in real time?
Okay. So the question is, does this only hold when they're off task? Does it also hold when they're on task? That research tends not to be done. The little that I have read is if you're on task, you're processing, you're doing okay. You're not going to see these kinds of detrimental impacts. There is some literature that indicates that taking notes by hand tends to lead to better processing than taking notes by typing. I'm also waiting for the follow-up studies on that one, because that really comes from 1 or 2. So that's the kind of in the same vein as this. So.
The effect on
Probably not as distracting, because you can look over and go, they're doing the slides same as up there, I'm not going to be paying much attention. But if it's whether or not Jon Snow died, I'm interested in that. Okay. Last question, and then I need to move on. I'm down to just a couple of minutes. Sure. Sure. The distraction, the question was, if we're breaking things down, if we're segmenting them, and we may be doing things in between, like answering questions, is that a form of this? And the answer is no. The processing is focused on the same content and the same skills, so it's not that you're diverting. I'm looking at oranges here and apples here. I'm still processing oranges in different ways. So you're not going to get the detriment that you would get if I was doing that and then watching a movie and then doing some more of that. So yes. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. Conscious tasks. Correct. Yes. Yes, because if my dribbling is automatic, then I can pay attention to strategy. Where am I going? If I, however, end up playing somebody who's really good at defense and as good as taking the ball away from me, my dribbling becomes conscious because now I'm thinking about it, which means my performance hits the toilet. Okay, this is the last one, and then I need one more thing. That's all right. Yes. Correct. They wouldn't be better generic multitaskers. Yes, they wouldn't be better generic multitaskers. What would happen is they would get really good at that one skill. And they could do something else while they're doing that one skill. But they're not generating general multitasking abilities. So that person who's really good at dribbling can probably dribble and have a conversation. I couldn't do that. I'd be chasing that ball all over. So we had a generation that was really good at texting because you could text everything with one thumb. Now that we have these different screens, you have to kind of look at it. So they're not nearly as good as they used to be. So it comes down to behavior, not a general skill development. Okay? All right, so I've got to be down to my last 2 minutes. I've got 2 minutes. Okay, so here we go. One of the questions that comes up is, well, you know, are they any better at it because they're youngsters? So we did a couple of research studies. One of them, we were looking at master's students in accounting versus professional accountants who had already had their MBAs. One group did a really easy math task, addition, multiplication, that kind of stuff, while they had to watch a challenging video. And then we asked them 10 questions. What we found was students got about 9 of those questions right. The multitasking was easy because the math was easy. Well, when we looked at the professionals, they did equally as well. Then came the high multitasking. We asked them to do applied math, which means they were looking at columns and all this kind of stuff. And we also asked them to do the challenging video. This was a different group. We got the multitasking impact, and it was equal across groups. So the 24-year-olds and the 50-year-olds were equally poor at multitasking. So then we looked at students. Undergraduate students, average year 19, their faculty, average age 41. Group A was a non-multitasking. All they did was watch the video. And students did the same as faculty. The second group is we had them answer a survey while the video, and this was a different group but same video. We got the multitasking effect, and there was no difference with faculty. There's no indication that age until you reach about 80 is going to have any impact on most of this. It's going to have more of an impact of what you were talking about, which is what skills do I have that are developed? Things I'm really good at, I'm more likely to be able to do something else. So here we go, last screen. So what does this mean for us? Students need to be aware of multitasking. At the beginning of every year, I do this multitasking with students all over campus. I go in and they do it and we talk about it. Some of them are convinced and some of them aren't. But they need to be aware that they are not the multitaskers they think they are. We need to get them to be self-regulated. That is, they need to find those environments that are good for them and not think they can have 12 screens open at once and still do well. And they need practice with feedback. They need to move along that conscious to automatic continuum. And they do that through practice with feedback. Now, feedback isn't right or wrong. It's what do you need in order to become better? So how do I make you a better writer, a better reader, a better problem solver? Okay?
How is performance and anxiety, how does that weigh?
Sure.
Also a task per se, aren't you focused on that? Kind of like, you're playing tennis and you're playing against Serena.
Sure.
And, you're at, match point.
Uh-huh.
And now you're worried.
Sure. You probably should have been worried when the first ball was hit. Yeah. Things like anxiety and negative thoughts are going to impact your performance because it's going to impact your ability to think your way through all of this. So you can take everything I just said and depress it a little bit more if you're under high tension. But high tension is a performance environment variable that you can learn to do better with. So you can have basketball where the coaches will pipe in crowd noise, because how do you play when you can't hear the person you're playing with? You need to learn how to do that and not wait for the last 3 minutes of the game. If students are at home studying on their couch with their Diet Coke and their cat and they're all great, and then they go in to take the test and it's in a different room and they're all stressed out, they're going to do less well. But we can teach them to relax more under those environments. So we're not just susceptible to that.
Just to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
If there was an automatic task and an automatic task, could you have surplus attention that would actually make you bored? I've heard people say, well, if I'm doing simple tasks, I need another task. Otherwise, I'll be bored in my mind.
Sure.
It seems ridiculous, but I wanted to check again.
The question is, if you're doing automatic tasks and you have a whole bunch of resources, cognitive resources left over, can that make you bored? And the answer is yes. Okay? We know that there are times when we can get bored at those kinds of things. If it's truly automatic, it's not going to matter. You're still going to be very fit. There are times I'm having conversations while I'm walking and I'm really bored, but I can still walk. Okay? But if you do something with that other capacity, it can interfere with the automatic task. So you've got to be careful with some of that. The other thing about automaticity is it can get in your way. You may need to be a flexible thinker, but if you're on automatic pilot, you're not thinking flexibly. You're just doing it. Okay, last comment, and then I am out of time.
I was wondering whether you would have like an instructional video, just a short video that would show our students that multitasking really doesn't work. Because I have tried to communicate that and they don't believe me.
Okay, so the question is an instructional video about multitasking to convince your students. I don't personally have one, but I can put you in touch with a couple.
That would be great. And
So, yeah.
another one, like the one that you showed us, because they would use that, well, that's driving.
Sure. Well, and you're going to have that problem. You're going to have students who think they can, in fact, do this. I am out of time. Thank you for your time very much. Appreciate it.